So, we're continuing our 5D series, and today we're going to be in the part of the five dimensions that we call culture. And watch the very first orientation video if you're new to this series so that you understand what the five dimensions are that we're talking about. But where we're located on the map today is the cultural part, which is a subcategory of the social dimension. Last time, we talked about what we called the man box or the boy box, and that is the collective socialization of how boys are expected to become men. It's how our culture defines and answers the question, what is a man? What does it mean to be a man? And there were three things we talked about last time, just by way of review, on culture and what culture does. We talked about how culture is the water that we swim in, that a fish doesn't know that it's wet. We don't know that we're swimming in the culture and how it's affecting us. And it has three qualities to it. First of all, culture is pre-reflective. What that simply means is culture, as we're growing up, installs ideas inside of us before we have the maturity to evaluate those ideas. So it becomes our default way of thinking before we can actually evaluate the hopefulness or the accuracy of that thought. And so it's pre-reflective. Culture influences us before we realize that we are being influenced by it. Secondly, it's comprehensive. Culture shapes how we interpret everything, and I do mean everything in our life. It is global in its reach inside of us. And then the third thing we talked about is culture is invisible. Like a fish who doesn't know what water is. Culture becomes visible to outsiders. So when we go to another culture, we notice things about their culture that those who are insiders wouldn't notice. It just seems like reality for them. But for us, it's different from our culture, and so it stands out to us. So specifically, we talked about the man box last time, the collective socialization of boys becoming men. And we talked about how that box is the cultural soil that grows the secret basement. This isn't causation, this is contribution. This is not an excuse, but it's an explanation. Not every boy who becomes a man inside the man box ends up being deceptive with their sexuality and creating a secret sexual basement. But it is the cultural soil that we need to understand from which we architected and built a secret sexual basement. Today, we're going to talk about what I call the complement or the antecedent to the man box, and that is what I'm going to call the girl box. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way in any way. What I simply want to refer to is there has been a lot of research done between ages 8 to 13 for girls as they become adolescents for the socialization, the messages that they receive on what is a woman. For the men on the call, I hope that this content today helps with your empathy work. I hope that it helps you to see your partner in a fresh, new light, where you understand what she's carrying, what she's been carrying as a woman since her childhood, and the socialization messages that she's been receiving, and what she's had to carry without the basement, but what we contributed to that with our deceptive sexuality. So before I look at the tenets of the girl box and what that means, I want to give credit to the original researchers who did research on this. If you want to dive deeper, just look into the research from Brown and Gilligan. They're the ones who originated this study, where they followed around 100 girls for 5 years between ages 8 to 13 as they entered into adolescence. And by the way, this research has been replicated many times by many other researchers, and the same findings have been validated and confirmed. And what we realize from the research is that girls naturally, before adolescence, before the girl box begins to socialize them, girls are direct, girls are confident, they are opinionated, they have strong opinions, they are full of life, they have a voice, and they use their voice. And I'm painting with broad strokes here. I know there's personality differences and things like that. But as a given, there is a contrast between the way a girl presents herself and the way she uses her voice pre-girl box and post-girl box. That's what the findings are suggesting. So what we see in the literature is that between ages 8 and 13 for girls, they literally receive thousands of messages from everywhere. This is globalistic. We're talking parents, siblings, teachers, coaches, media, extended family, peers, everywhere. Thousands of messages during that critical window of development where they are told certain things, such as, when you are too direct, that is unattractive in a woman. Women are not supposed to be that outspoken and direct. Another message that they receive as girls become women, as they enter adolescence, is that if you're too opinionated, that's bossy. Well, women aren't supposed to be bossy. That's seen in a negative light. And your value is your appearance, specifically your body. That's where your value, that's where your real value is. In other words, the message that girls receive as they become young women is that being seen is more important than being heard. And what Gilligan and Brown called this is a journey for girls, a journey from voice to silence and to disconnection. The girl box. Let's look at some of the tenets from the research of the girl box. What are girls between 8 and 13 expected to become as they become women? The first tenet is this: you are to be pretty. And pretty often means to be thin. And a woman needs to be nice. What that means is there's not to be any excesses in these following things. You are not to be, quote unquote, too much. No drama. When you start going into drama, you are too much. You're not to be too loud. You need to silence and censor your voice. You're not to be too angry. Now, it's okay for a man to get angry, but if a woman becomes angry, she's often called derogatory terms. Also, don't be too needy. And whatever you do, don't make a scene, especially if it's going to embarrass or make the man look bad. In fact, you need to make him feel good. And as a woman, one thing that a woman does is she cares for everybody, but don't focus on your needs. That's being needy. But you need to care for the kids. You need to care for the husband. You need to care for the house. You need to care for anybody who is a guest in your home. You need to care for everybody. That's part of the expectation of being a woman. And by the way, your worth ultimately is found in your appearance, and your value ultimately is found in your husband or your partner's approval. What I want you to see is, if you compare this to the boy box, the man box we looked at last time, the girl box is designed to serve the man box. The man box exists for the benefit of the man, and the girl box exists for the benefit of the man. I want you to see that. Now, the question comes up, how is this happening? What is the methods that are being used for the collective socialization of our young girls becoming women? I've got 3 daughters, and so this message really hits home for me. Where does it originate? How is this happening? The first place that the research shows is that it's happening within the family of origin. This is often where those very first messages begin to show up for girls. That you don't need to be too loud, don't be bossy, don't be too much. And a girl growing up, especially if she has a brother, she begins to notice, now wait a minute, why are there different rules for my brother? That I have different rules from him. Why is there this discrepancy? And it's usually often the family of origin, but not always, but often within the family or extended family. She experiences for the first time some kind of comment that is made about her body. Now, it may show up in the second point, which is schools and peers. And if it doesn't show up in the family, it'll certainly show up here. But often the very first time she receives some kind of message that your worth is mainly found in your appearance and in your body is within the family origin. This is often between these first two. This is often where she begins to realize what social scientists call the dynamic of the male gaze. She begins to realize that she is supposed to look a certain way for men, that men have a gaze, men are looking, and you need to perform for that gaze. And so that comes online for her. She begins to realize that that is a cultural phenomenon. The second way that she is socialized by the girl box is at school, and especially with peers. Here's what the literature shows. Between ages 8 and 13, there is a decline, there is a drop in girls and their classroom participation. She becomes less likely to raise her hand. She becomes less likely to ask a question. She becomes less likely to offer an answer because it might be wrong. And if she enters that window of her development and she is still loud and she is still direct, she will often be socially punished by girls and teachers and peers who have all accepted the girl box, and she's being pressured to fall in line, get back in the box. The third way that we socialize our girls as they become women is through media. That these tenets are found all throughout music, advertisements, movies, streaming, and especially the algorithms of social media. All of these reward a certain look, a certain appearance. That is often the expectation that she be thin, that she be smiling, that she be this combination of you need to be sexually attractive, but don't be sexually promiscuous. And men, if they're sexually promiscuous, there's a different messaging on that than there is for women. So be sexually attractive, but don't be sexually easy. Be emotional, but don't be angry. That's not okay. Be capable and smart, but don't threaten men in the process. And what girls are doing, especially in this particular age, they are scrolling this script for hours every day. And they are being indoctrinated into the girl box. Finally, I hate to include this one, but I would be amiss if I neglected to show that the literature, unfortunately, shows that many religious cultures promote the girl box, that sacred writing and scripture can be weaponized, where girls learn in that religious culture that you are to be quiet, you are to be submissive, don't ever question your husband. And if you're going through suffering, you should smile through it. One of the verses that we looked at last week that also applies to what we're talking about today is Romans 12:2, where it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That word conformed is the word picture of being poured into a mold. And what the man box and the girl box basically do is they try to force us into a mold, and we are punished if we don't fit that mold. And what Paul is saying in that verse is, this world, which means the culture around us, will try to conform us to a certain image. And that image is not the imago Dei, the image of God. It is the image that the world wants you to fit into. Do not allow the world to conform you into that image. Instead, be transformed. How? By the renewing of our mind, by letting go of these tenets, by thinking differently. Now, I want to talk about the cost because the costs are real. Last week, when we looked at the man box, we talked about the cost of the man box. But let's talk about the cost of the girl box. Number one, the loss of her voice. That silence that she enters into between ages 8 to 13 can last for decades. Part of recovery after D-Day for many betrayed partners is simply finding their voice again. And that is their work, to not be silent anymore, to find their voice, to find their personal power, and to use their voice to express their pain, to express their anger, to express their trauma. And that needs to happen. And it is going to go against the influence of the girl box. It's going to go against the conditioning that she's had her entire life. My own personal theory, I don't see this in the literature. I don't see this in the Mwala model. This is my own personal perspective. I think the reason that the highest number of IABs, integrity abuse behaviors, those 60 some odd abusive behaviors, the reason they show up in such a concentrated way post D-Day is when they show up the most, is because she finds her voice and we react to that because she's not supposed to have a voice. She's being too angry. She's being too outspoken. She's asking too many questions. She's being vocal about her trauma and this impact on her. And I've been conditioned in the man box. She's been conditioned in the girl box that she's not supposed to do that. And so as a matter of control, a lot of IABs come online at that point. The second loss is what I call self-objectification. And we've talked about this before, that for all of us, but especially for women, and this usually develops during that 8 to 13 time period, women will develop this inner critic twin, this second self, this second voice inside of them that is constantly grading their body and their appearance. And they begin to objectify themselves the way culture objectifies them. And that is a real cost to women. A third cost for women is they're supposed to care for everyone else to the neglect of themselves, because that's what the girl box trains them to do. You need to care for everybody, but don't be needy. Don't focus on your own needs. The fourth cost of the girl box is they pay for it with both their body and their mind. What the research shows, and this is well documented, is that girls in adolescence have higher rates of anxiety than boys, higher rates of depression than boys, higher rates of eating disorders than boys, and higher incidence of self-harm. So the cost of the girl box is their body and their mind. Fifthly, one of the costs is they are being conditioned to comply with the harm that's being done to them. They are being told that you need to absorb the harm. You need to accommodate the abuse. You need to minimize the impact. You need to keep the peace. And the result is they either begin to disbelieve their own perceptions, especially about what's happening in the secret basement, or they begin to silence their perceptions. What I'm saying is the girl box leaves women vulnerable to specific kinds of harm. And the secret basement is one of those types of harm. I want the partners to understand the secret basement in no form or fashion is your fault at all. This was something constructed by him, and you have no ownership in that. But I'm saying the girl box made you vulnerable to this. Because the girl box was telling you, even in the midst of your pain, in the midst of your suspicion, don't be too much. Don't be too loud. Don't get angry. Don't be needy. You need to be nice. Don't make a scene. Don't make him look bad. You need to make him feel good. You need to care for him to the neglect of yourself. And your worth is based upon your appearance and especially his approval. So the tenets of the girl box are set up to make you more vulnerable to this product of the man box, which is the basement. Now, I am not saying that the basement is the fault of the man box. The man box did not create the basement. The man chose to do that. This was a contribution. This is not the cause. This is an explanation. It's not an excuse. There are men who grow up with this socialization who do not create a secret sexual basement and deceive and betray their partners. So we cannot claim causation, and we cannot absolve our own responsibility for architecting and creating and maintaining this basement. This creates the conditions for the basement, and the girl box makes it harder for her to see it and makes it harder for her to say something about it. With that in mind, after D-Day, I want to point out something. Our culture, the man box and the girl box, after D-Day, in recovery, especially for the women, our culture will tell you, despite the trauma, despite the pain, you need to get back in the box. Our culture will gaslight you. When he says in your pain that you are overreacting and that there's something wrong with you, the girl box has been preparing you all your life to believe what he's saying. What our culture will say to you after D-Day, in the midst of your pain, our culture will say to you things like, hey, boys will be boys. This is just what the man box is. Our culture will minimize what you've been through. Even the church many times will gaslight you and say too prematurely, well, yeah, I know that he betrayed you and he deceived you and your entire marriage has been a lie, but you need to forgive him right now and you need to reconcile and you need to extend trust to him. Even therapists will sometimes pathologize you, and they don't recognize the specific trauma injury that you've been through. Instead, they'll say that you're part of the problem You're codependent. You're a co-addict. You've got some kind of mood disorder. You need to calm it down. That after D-Day, our culture will gaslight you. Not only that, the man box is going to attack your recovery after D-Day. Here's how it's going to show up. The man box will be influencing your partner, us men, that a real man should not tolerate being controlled by a woman, and she's trying to control you right now. GPS trackers, accountability software. You can't watch a freaking movie. You can't go wherever you want to go. She's now telling you that you need to bounce your eyes or look down. Are you going to be controlled by a woman? The man box says, that's not manly. It's not manly to sit with her emotions. Men don't do that. Men don't apologize. Men don't own or admit when they've done something wrong. The man box will tell men when they try to go into real, genuine recovery, they're going to tell them that's not manly. You got to turn in your man card if you're going to live like that. So both the man box and the girl box will attack your recovery. It is going against culture to enter into true recovery. There will be cultural pressure for you women to get back into the girl box. And here's what happens. Many of you, for the first time, or at least for the first time in a long time, will find your voice during recovery. And you're not going to perform anymore. You detox from the girl box. I am not going to smile and pretend like everything's okay. I am allowed to be angry. Righteous anger, because this was unjust what was done to me. I am allowed to use my voice to share my pain and to share my trauma, to share my boundaries, and to share what I need without being labeled needy. I'm not going to keep the peace anymore. And I am going to practice self-care. I'm not going to neglect myself anymore. Women, when you do that, the culture will punish you for it. They will call you bitter. You will be called stuck. You will be pressured to hurry up and get over it and neglect your own healing timeline. You need to be nice again. You need to forgive him. You need to trust him again. You need to reconcile. Get back in the box. So men, I want to issue a challenge to you. One of the most important things that you can do for your partner in recovery is to absolutely refuse to try and push her back in the box. And not only refuse to push her back in the box, but to actively support her exit and detox from this box, and actively support the use of her voice. Women, our culture has trained you to be small. And for many of you, the trauma that you have been through has broken the box for you. And you are not going to stay in it anymore, nor should you. You are allowed to take as long as you need to take with your healing. Anyone, I don't care if it's a therapist, a minister, a friend, a family member, or your partner, anyone who is telling you to get back in the box is not safe. And you need to distance yourself from their voice as you work on your recovery and your healing.